At 85, Sir Cliff Richard stands as one of the last living architects of British popular music. His career began before rock and roll had truly taken root in the UK and endured long after trends rose and fell. With time has come reflection, and with reflection, honesty. Now, in his later years, Cliff has spoken openly about his relationship with one of the most enigmatic figures in modern music history, George Harrison. Their bond was never flashy or public, but it was meaningful, shaped by shared fame, artistic integrity, and a mutual search for spiritual truth. Cliff's reflections are not confessions meant to shock, but memories offered with wisdom and gratitude. Through his words, we see George Harrison not as a Beatle frozen in myth, but as a thoughtful, gentle soul navigating the same pressures that Cliff himself knew all too well. From India to England, the making of Cliff. Richard Cliff. Richard was born Harry Roger Webb on October 14, 1940, in Lucknow, India, during the final years of British colonial rule. When his family returned to England in 1948, they settled into the realities of post-war Britain, marked by rationing and modest living. Growing up in Cheesehunt, Hertfordshire, Cliff found escape and inspiration in American rock and roll. The voices of Elvis Presley and Little Richard ignited a passion that would change his life. Music became his language of joy and ambition. Unlike many of his peers, Cliff combined youthful rebellion with discipline and optimism. He wasn't just chasing fame, he was building something lasting. Those early years, shaped by humility and determination, laid the foundation for a career that would redefine British pop music. Move It and the birth of British rock. In 1958, Cliff Richard burst onto the scene with Move It, a song now widely regarded as the first authentic British rock and roll record. Its raw energy and driving rhythm electrified audiences and announced the arrival of a new sound. Backed by his band, initially called The Drifters and later renamed The Shadows, Cliff quickly became Britain's answer to Elvis Presley. The combination of his smooth vocals and The Shadows' instrumental brilliance created a signature style that dominated the charts. Hits like Living Doll, Please Don't Tease, and The Young Ones followed, making Cliff a teen idol and cultural phenomenon. Before the Beatles had formed, Cliff Richard had already proven that British artists could create rock music that rivaled America's best. Adapting as the Beatles changed everything. When the Beatles emerged in the early 1960s, the music world shifted dramatically. Many early rock stars faded into obscurity, but Cliff Richard adapted. Rather than competing, he evolved. His clean-cut image and versatile voice allowed him to move seamlessly from rock and roll into pop ballads and inspirational music. Songs like Congratulations, which he performed at the 1968 Eurovision Song Contest, showcased his global appeal. Cliff's ability to grow with his audience became his greatest strength. While the Beatles revolutionized culture, Cliff remained relevant by staying true to himself. It was during this era that his path would cross with George Harrison, a meeting that would quietly shape both men's perspectives on fame, faith, and artistry. Faith, longevity, and an unmatched career. Cliff Richard's conversion to Christianity in the mid-1960s became a defining force in his life and music. His faith gave him grounding in an industry often marked by excess and instability. Over the decades, he balanced pop success with gospel recordings, creating a career guided by conviction rather than controversy. His achievements are staggering. Over 250 million records sold, top 5 UK hits in every decade from the 1950s to the 2010s, and a knighthood in 1995, making him the first rock star to receive such an honor. Yet Cliff remained humble, private, and disciplined. His reputation for professionalism and kindness earned him respect across generations. Longevity for Cliff was not accidental, it was intentional. A private life lived with purpose. Despite global fame, Cliff Richard has always guarded his personal life carefully. He never married, choosing instead to focus on faith, friendship, and music. Dividing his time between the UK, Barbados, and Portugal, Cliff cultivated a quieter existence away from the spotlight. Those close to him describe a man of generosity, punctuality, and deep respect for others. Even in his later years, his enthusiasm for performing remains undiminished. Concerts are not just shows, but celebrations of shared memory and gratitude. Cliff's life reflects a rare balance, public success paired with private peace. This perspective would later shape how he understood George Harrison, another man who wrestled with fame while seeking something deeper. Meeting George Harrison, a quiet beginning. Cliff. Richard first met George Harrison in the early 1960s, when the Beatles were still rising and Cliff was already a household name. Their meeting was unassuming, far from the glamour one might expect. Cliff remembered George as shy, observant, and quietly curious. There was no bravado, only presence. While George admired Cliff's professionalism and early success, Cliff was struck by George's musicianship and humility. Their bond formed slowly, without expectation. They were not close companions, but kindred spirits. Both understood the cost of fame, even at different stages. From the beginning, Cliff sensed that George carried a depth that extended far beyond pop stardom. Spiritual conversations. Across different paths. One of the most meaningful aspects of Cliff and George's relationship was their shared interest in spirituality. Though their beliefs differed, Cliff grounded in Christianity, George drawn to Eastern philosophy, they found common ground. Their conversations were never debates, but explorations. Cliff recalled George saying, "All paths lead to the same place if your heart is right." That sentiment stayed with him. Both men were searching for peace, truth, and meaning beyond applause. Cliff admired George's openness and sincerity. In a world driven by image and success, George's spiritual curiosity felt brave. These exchanges left a lasting impression on Cliff, influencing how he approached his own music and the faith. Fame, withdrawal, and quiet admiration. As the Beatles reached unimaginable heights, George Harrison grew increasingly uncomfortable with fame. Cliff understood this instinct deeply. While Cliff continued performing for decades, he admired George's courage to step away. George's retreat into gardening, meditation, and quieter creativity reflected a desire for authenticity. Cliff admitted that he sometimes envied that freedom. At industry gatherings, Cliff recalled moments where George would play sitar not to impress, but to express something personal. Those moments revealed George's soul more clearly than stadium performances ever could. To Cliff, George was not running from fame. He was protecting his spirit. That distinction mattered: loss, legacy, and lasting respect. When George Harrison passed away in 2001, Cliff felt a deeper loss than he expected. Though they were not constant companions, George's presence had been significant. Cliff mourned not just the musician, but the man who stayed true to himself. He reflected on George's legacy as one rooted in sincerity, peace, and artistic integrity. In Cliff's view, George reminded the world that music should come from the soul, not the charts. That lesson feels increasingly rare. Even now, Cliff speaks of George with warmth and reverence, seeing him as a quiet teacher whose influence extended beyond sound into spirit. Conclusion: two souls on the same road. At 85, Cliff Richard looks back with gratitude rather than regret. His reflections on George Harrison reveal more than friendship. They reveal understanding. Two men from different paths, faiths, and personalities, united by music and a shared search for meaning. Cliff's truth is not dramatic, but deeply human. George Harrison was not just a Beatle or an icon. He was a gentle soul seeking peace in a noisy world. In honoring that truth, Cliff Richard offers a tribute that transcends fame. Their quiet connection stands as a reminder that behind the legends are human beings, walking the same road, searching for harmony not only in music, but in life itself.